They say intelligence is admired. But what if that's only true when it's convenient? What if the moment you start seeing too much, asking too deeply, you don't become wise, you become a threat? Maybe it's not your mind that's the problem. Maybe it's the world around you.
Have you ever been in a room and felt like no one else is really thinking? Like you're surrounded by noise, conversation, laughter, and yet not a single word touches anything real? You start to wonder if you're the problem. Maybe you're overanalyzing. Maybe you should just relax, blend in, laugh at the joke, agree with the small talk. But something inside you resists. Not out of arrogance, out of hunger. A hunger for something deeper. You ask why. Not to provoke, not to disrupt, but because you genuinely want to understand. Why things are the way they are. Why people follow certain rules but not others. Why everyone seems so comfortable in ideas that feel so hollow. But here's what no one tells you. Asking why can be a dangerous thing. Not to you, but to everyone else. Because questions have a way of unraveling things. And most people are clinging to certainty like it's oxygen. They don't want to think. They want reassurance. They don't want reality. They want comfort. And when you show up with questions, you become a threat to that comfort. A mirror they didn't ask for. This is why deep thinkers often feel like outsiders. Not because they're broken, but because they can't unsee what others refuse to look at. They walk into a room and feel the gap between what's being said and what's actually being felt. They notice the contradictions, the pretenses, the avoidance. And over time, that awareness becomes a kind of exile. You become the one who's too serious, too intense, too sensitive. But really, you're just paying attention. Socrates lived in that exile. He wasn't trying to be admired. He wasn't trying to win arguments. He simply refused to pretend he knew what he didn't. And that honesty, that radical humility, made people furious, because it forced them to confront their own ignorance. His questions weren't attacks. They were invitations. But most people saw them as threats. Because to question what you believe, that takes courage. Most people would rather mock the question than face the discomfort of not knowing. And so, like you, Socrates became an outsider. Not because he didn't belong, but because he belonged to a deeper truth than the world was willing to accept. And this is where the real tension begins. Because once you start seeing through the surface, once your mind refuses to settle for easy answers, you don't just feel different. You become difficult to manage. You stop nodding along. You stop following scripts. And that's when something shifts. Not just in you, but in how the world treats you. Let's talk about that. Society fears what it can't control, and nothing is harder to control than a mind that sees too clearly. You start noticing patterns, the way people repeat what they hear without questioning, the way certain emotions are manufactured, certain truths are avoided, certain roles are assigned. And everyone plays along like it's all natural. But you know better. You see the cracks. You feel the weight of all the unspoken lies, in conversations, in relationships, in culture, in politics. And while others are busy distracting themselves, you start pulling the threads. And that's when the panic begins. Because those threads you pull, they hold everything together. People don't want to see the machinery behind the illusion. They don't want to know that the rules they follow are arbitrary, that the beliefs they cling to are inherited, not examined, that the roles they play are not chosen, but imposed. Your intelligence doesn't just challenge opinions, it threatens foundations. It shakes structures, not with rebellion, not with rage, but with questions. And questions are dangerous. Socrates understood this. He didn't stand on stages shouting radical theories. He sat in the public square, calmly asking people what they thought they knew. And that calmness, that quiet, persistent curiosity, it dismantled the illusion of knowledge. It showed people that they weren't standing on truth, but on borrowed assumptions. And instead of gratitude, they gave him fear. Instead of reflection, they gave him punishment. That's what happens when your silence becomes too loud, when your presence becomes a challenge. People don't just misunderstand you, they try to erase you, because you represent something they can't predict, can't tame, can't label, and that scares them. But here's the part that hurts the most. They won't just call you smart. They'll call you arrogant, rebellious, cold, difficult. Not because you are, but because they need a reason to reject what you reveal. And that brings us to something even more painful. You don't just feel rejected, you feel distorted, misread, painted as something you're not, simply because you refuse to be shallow. Let's go deeper into that. You don't just feel rejected, you feel misunderstood, mischaracterized, like people aren't seeing you, they're seeing their discomfort with you, and so they call you names, not out of truth, but out of defense. Too intense, too serious, too much. You ask a genuine question and they roll their eyes. You speak a difficult truth and they laugh, as if mockery is easier than reflection. But what they don't realize is, you're not trying to be difficult, you're just refusing to be fake. This is the cost of depth. The deeper you think, the lonelier it gets. Not because you isolate yourself, but because others don't want to go where you're willing to go. They don't want to sit with uncertainty. They don't want to face contradiction. They don't want to feel the weight of real thought. So they call it negativity. They call it arrogance. But it's not arrogance to refuse shallow answers. It's not rebellion to want truth. Socrates lived that weight. He asked questions not to destroy, but to clarify. He didn't tell people what to think. He helped them see what they already believed. And that was the problem. Because most people didn't want to see. They wanted comfort, not clarity. And when clarity arrived, they called it corruption. They said Socrates was corrupting the youth. But the truth is, he was waking them up. And nothing is more threatening to a comfortable system than people who wake up. So, they silenced him. Not because he was wrong, but because he made them confront what they were afraid to face. His death wasn't just an execution, it was a message. Don't question too much. Don't see too much. Don't disturb the illusion. And that message didn't end with him. You feel it today, every time someone tells you to tone it down, to stop overthinking, to just go with the flow. But what if that pressure to conform isn't a sign that you're flawed, but that you're seeing something others can't? What if the reason you don't fit in is because you were never meant to? Because now, as we reach the heart of it, we need to ask a final honest question. What if you're not behind? You're ahead. If society doesn't understand you, maybe that's not a flaw. Maybe it's a sign. Maybe the silence you feel around you isn't emptiness. It's space. Space between where the world is and where you already are. You've been told that your questions are disruptive, that your intensity is too much, that your refusal to conform is dangerous. And maybe they're right, but not in the way they think. You are dangerous to illusion, to mediocrity, to blind obedience. And deep down, that's why they keep their distance. Not because there's something wrong with you, but because there's something unfinished in them. Your presence awakens the part of them they've long silenced. You feel alone, but you are not alone. You are just ahead of your time. Many of history's most brilliant minds walked that same road, misunderstood, ridiculed, cast out, and not because they failed, but because they saw too much, too soon. Galileo was condemned for seeing the stars. Van Gogh died unknown. Kafka's genius was discovered only after his death. And then there was Socrates, put to death not for violence or betrayal, but for asking questions no one wanted to answer. He didn't fight back. He didn't run. He drank the poison calmly because he understood something that most people never will. Ideas do not die, and neither does truth. You can bury a man, but not a mind, not a spirit, not a question that refuses to be silenced. So, if you feel out of place in this world, don't rush to change yourself. Don't shrink. Don't dilute. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to become fully yourself, even if that self doesn't fit the current moment. And maybe that's the real reason you're here, to plant seeds that won't bloom until long after you're gone, to ask the questions that others are too afraid to say out loud, to carry the weight of thought. Not because it's easy, but because someone must. Because truth is lonely. Depth is rare. And if you're feeling both, it doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're already on the path most never find. Keep walking.